Thank you so much for attending our webinar this afternoon, which is focused on returning to the workplace. My name is Karen Lanigan. I'm Head of Member Experience here with Chartered Accountants Ireland. I'll also be joined by my colleague Francesca from CA Support and Thrive a little later on in the webinar. So the objectives today are basically to help you and to support you as you return to work. So that's irrespective of the return, whether it's from parental leave, maternity leave, a career break, redundancy, etc. All of the same principles apply. So that's the lens that we're essentially looking at this through, and it's helping you as you set new goals, set new parameters, and you look at, I suppose, the return to work in the context of looking at this as an opportunity to reshape your professional life, and also then, I suppose, looking at the process of reconnecting with your professional self, and also then looking at I suppose things through from the perspective of balancing work and home, also looking at ways in which to kind of deal with the stress that can come from these situations, and I suppose also looking at the importance of self-care and looking after your well-being, which is obviously a big focus and has been increasingly over the last number of years. And I'd like to also take the opportunity to introduce you to the supports that are available here to you as a member of Chartered Accountants Ireland. So that includes our career support, and also then, as I mentioned, CA Support and Thrive that Francesca will take you through a little later on. So firstly, if I could just ask you to, in the chat, just to kind of give me a sense of how long you've been out of the workplace. So if you could just pop a quick note into the chat there, just in terms of how long you've been out of the workplace, because it'll just help me in terms of framing the rest of the talk today, Locke. So whether it's 1 year or 10 years or 15 years, just to kind of get a sense of how long you've been out of the workplace. So if you could just pop that into the chat for me there, that would be really helpful. Perfect. So 1 year, excellent. Okay. Any other 8 months? Okay, perfect. So kind of similar time frame. So a relatively short period of time. Okay, so that helps in that context. And then similarly then as well, in terms of another question, what is concerning you most about a return to the workplace? So if I could just get a couple of kind of insights there, that would be really helpful in terms of what's on your mind most, what's worrying you most about, the return to the workplace, what reservations you might have about that, in the context of having been out a year, 8 months. If it's longer, happy to, obviously, for you to contribute there as well. So I'll just give you a moment to do that. Okay, so maintaining work-life balance, absolutely. And that is something we'll cover now shortly. Okay, so we'll move on from that. So basically then, if we look at what the common challenges are that face us as we return to the workplace, and one of the common questions that I get when I'm dealing with members, irrespective of whether they've been out of the workplace for 8 months, a year, 8 years, 10 years, is like, where do I start with this process? And that could be very daunting. So for example, if you've been out for quite a number of years, it can be starting with like CV and interview preparation. If you've been out on maternity leave or paternity leave, for example, or a career break, it's all about, well, how do I maintain that work-life balance, as we just heard there? How do I develop new routines? How do I adapt to the changes in the workplace, in terms of whether that's technology or the changing ways of work? And it's just kind of managing, keeping all those balls in the air, as it were, and managing that new level of busyness and carving out time for yourself and quality family time during that as well. And then, as we said, looking after your health and well-being, and just getting that balance. So they're all really common challenges that I hear a lot, whether it's that you've been out of the workplace for a shorter period of time, or indeed a longer period of time. They're very common challenges. And the thing to remember is that returning back to the workplace is a process, and there is definitely a time of adjustment. It's a physical and an emotional journey, and it's not to be underestimated. So you do need to give yourself time to adjust to that process. And for many of us, like, you can be I suppose a different person with different priorities when you're returning to the workplace. So for example, you might have left a full-time role and you're coming back now thinking, well, actually, do you know what, I'd prefer to work part-time. Or you might have other family responsibilities, for example, or you may have a new focus on health and well-being if you've been off due to illness. So there's a whole range of things going on here. So you do need to kind of remember that, and not to be too hard on yourself. Give yourself a bit of, cut yourself a bit of slack, as I've mentioned there. Also, as well, it is a journey. It's going to take some time. So it's not really a good idea to kind of take your emotional temperature, as it were, when you're just a few weeks into it. Because I remember myself when I went back from maternity leave, and I was back maybe, I'd say, a month. I was thinking, gosh, yeah, this is great. I can manage this. It's all going really well. And then I suppose the tiredness can kick in, the busy schedules kind of develop out further. And it was only when I was 3 or 4 months into it that I kind of went, oh, hold on a minute. I need to adjust a few things here, So it is important just to kind of give yourself those parameters. The other interesting thing to note is that obviously, the workplace is changing quite rapidly all of the time, and particularly with COVID and hybrid working arrangements now, a lot of organizations and employees are going through a time of change as well. So in that sense, it's actually probably a good time to be going back into the workplace, because everybody is in that state of flux and change as well, and that presents a good opportunity. So it's definitely something to keep in mind. So then the first thing we're going to look at is kind of starting with the end in mind. So in other words, if you're planning, your return to work, what you want to do is kind of stand back from this and say to yourself, well, look, what do I want this to look like, when I'm back in the workplace? So it's really important that you take the time before you go back to really think about what is it that you want from your career now, because what you want from your career now could be very different to what it was 2, 3, 5 years ago. Because as our life moves on and we go through different stages, obviously our priorities change. So it's really just looking at that now and saying, what will keep you motivated and happy now? What do you want from your professional life? What balance do you want between your professional and professional and personal life? And what might that look like? And trying to get a picture of that, I suppose, imagining that ideal scenario for you, what will work. And for all of us, that's going to be very different. But it's really just checking in with yourself now and saying, right, what will work here from both a professional and a personal perspective, so that when I go back, it is ideal and it is working for me. So that's really important. I should have actually just said, if you have any questions as we go through this, do just pop them into the Q&A box at the on the screen there. Don't be afraid to pop in any questions there. So the other important thing here is, when you're looking at the various different options, is to kind of reach out to your network. So what I mean by that is to kind of speak to family and friends and people who know you very well, and just kind of get their sense, and their I suppose advice and guidance in relation to what they feel would work for you. What are they seeing from others that they know in terms of what the trends are? What are our employers offering at the moment? What are the options there? And it's about reconnecting in, or connecting in with others in the workplace, just to kind of get a general sense of what's happening, particularly at the moment, because things have moved so much. And also as well, if you are actively looking for a new role, it's to reach out to recruiters, or indeed ourselves here with the Institute Career Service, just to get a temperature of what's happening on the ground, and a sense of well, look, what's the work environment like at the moment? What's the world of work like? What's happening out there? Where are the opportunities? Where are the challenges? What do you need to consider as you look to return to the workplace? So it's really just getting that input. If you've been on maternity leave, it's kind of connecting in with your colleagues, and really getting a sense of what the lay of the land is. How are things working from a hybrid working perspective? Is that an option? What flexibility has been afforded to staff, for example. So I think that can be really, really important. Similarly, if you're going back from maternity or parental leave, or paternity leave, it's really to have those conversations with your boss, and ideally to have those as well in advance as you possibly can, so you can sit down, plan it out, set objectives, and really kind of take control of that conversation, and how you can do that is by making sure that you know what it is you want before you go in. So you have a very clear set of objectives going into the conversation, and you know what you want to come away with. I think it's important to be really honest and candid and upfront, because there's no point in signing up for something that ultimately isn't going to work. So you have to be realistic here and set objectives and set out the I suppose set out your stall as it will actually work for you. And don't be afraid to kind of ask for a bit of advice and guidance. We are finding now that employers are much more empathetic, much more supportive in the current environment, and they're more likely to be kind of flexible, and work with you around any specific requests that you might have. It's also a good opportunity to confirm your commitment to the organization, and that can really put you in a strong position, particularly in an environment where there is a shortage of talent. Organizations want to hold on to people. So if they can see that, look, you're absolutely committed to the organization, they are going to want to keep you, and maybe be a little bit more flexible in terms of meeting you in on the way to getting a balance that works. So the other important thing is about setting your goals, and I'm sure you all know about SMART goals, so I'm not going to go into that in any great level of detail, but it's really kind of mapping out those goals. So your short-term goals might be, well, okay, within the first 6 months, my objective is just really to kind of get back, settle back into things, find a bit of a rhythm. The medium term then goals are that little bit longer to kind of say, okay, so I'm settled back in now. And then you might be looking to see, okay, so I've settled in, what other opportunities might there be within the organization now for me to expand out my role, or to get involved in other areas, or it could be in relation to upskilling, for example. And then longer term is that kind of 3 to 5 years plus space to kind of think, well, down the line, where is it I'd like to be? So that for some, that might be kind of ramping things up. For others, it might be, another, a maternity leave, or for others, it might be, moving towards retirement and maybe part-time working at that stage. So it's really depending on what it is that works for you, but it's keeping in mind that intersection between your personal and professional goals. A good thing to do when you're establishing your goals and figuring them out is to write them down, because it just helps you to get that clarity. You should also kind of share them with family and friends, and kind of just check in with them to make sure, particularly if you have a partner or close family, just kind of check in and say to them, look, does this make sense? Do you think this would work for me? What are your thoughts? And then just to kind of test them and review them, and don't be afraid to kind of revisit them, because things can shift. As we know, the world is really dynamic and things change, so you might need to revisit them and reshape them depending on I suppose kind of what happens in life in the meantime. So it's all about that kind of flexibility and agility, and being able to move with those as well, obviously within reason. So it's about setting those SMART goals that work for you, and I suppose tweaking them as you might need to, depending on what's happening in your life. So I mentioned this earlier as well, about kind of setting kind of expectations and goals, but it's really also looking at this kind of new phase and stage of your life, and seeing what your new priorities are. So for some, it might be that you have a family now, so that kind of changes things. And I know, for example, myself, when I had my first child, before that I was working like 8 till at least 6 o'clock every evening. When my son came along, for me, that just wasn't workable anymore. So I needed to find a different balance. And one of my priorities was to make sure that I was there in the evening. For some people, that's different. And it's whatever really are your new priorities. And I suppose kind of working things around that, and saying to yourself, well, look, what's realistic for you now? For me, working till kind of 6, 7 o'clock at night just wasn't realistic. So it was really kind of stepping back and looking at it and saying, okay, so what does work for me? And at the time, for me, that was working 8 to 4, and taking a shorter lunch break and condensing my hours. And that worked really, really well at the time. So it's looking to see where there's a shift that might be required. It's checking in with your values. For me at the time, it was like family was important, still is, but like that was a key value for me in terms of that work-life balance. So it's really checking in with those and making sure that the goals and the plans that you're setting are realistic, but also align with what it is you want from your personal life, and what it is you want things to look like now. So if you're thinking about it and saying, well, look, actually, I'd like to be able to collect the kids from school 2 days a week, or I'd like to make sure that I'm there to drop the kids off to school, or I want to be there to make the dinners in the evening, whatever that might be, or I need time to go and visit my mum, on two evenings a week. So whatever that is, it's making sure that that works for you and it's fit into your schedule. Or for some members that I speak to, it's about voluntary work that they do that's really important to them. I spoke to a member last week, and like the voluntary work that she does with St. Vincent de Paul is really important to her. So she wants to make sure that she has a couple of hours one day a week to be able to volunteer, as she has been doing. And like, I'm increasingly seeing that it's not just family commitments. There are other commitments that people have within their lives that they want to make a commitment to, and they want their professional lives to work around that within reason. So it's just looking at that for you and what works for you. As I mentioned already, it's important to kind of take it easy on yourself, accept that this is a transition back into the workplace. So for example, I know a number of colleagues and members who, when they're coming back from maternity leave, might come back part-time initially. So they might use some of their annual leave or parental leave to work part-time, and then kind of build it up, or maybe even stay working part-time. So it's really whatever works for you. So it's just to kind of ease yourself back into the workplace again. Acknowledge that, look, this is going to take a bit of time, and it's really important that you build in that time for yourself when you're making those arrangements. And for example, like a nice thing to do is to when you start back, is to make sure you've holidays planned that aren't too far away, so that there's a bit of a break coming that helps you to kind of keep going. Even starting on a Wednesday, break yourself in gently, so you're not going back to doing a full week straight away. So it's really just, as I said earlier, cutting yourself a little bit of slack and going easy on yourself. It's really important. And again, it's just to watch the messaging that you're sending to yourself, because we're often our own worst critics, and we put most of the pressure on ourselves, because very often the pressure isn't coming from externally, it's coming from within our own minds in terms of the expectations that we set of ourselves. So do watch that in terms of the messaging that you're sending to yourself, and the expectations, because I know for some it can be quite difficult going back to the workplace, because I suppose they want to do really, really well work-wise, and also be the best parent that they possibly can be. And sometimes they feel like they're caught in the middle and doing neither particularly well, but very often that's more in their own head than it is the reality of the situation, Locke. So it's really just to be very mindful that you're not sending yourself kind of negative messages, or being that inner critic of yourself, because that can really kind of bring you down and have a negative impact on your overall self-confidence, and indeed your overall well-being, shall we say. So setting boundaries, and I'm sure we're all very familiar with this, and it was a big topic of conversation, in fact, during the kind of the lockdowns and the pandemic, where I suppose there was tended to be a blurring between kind of work and life. But I suppose when you're going back into the workplace, it's really important to kind of, I suppose, set those boundaries and set those expectations right from the get-go, and that's irrespective of whether you're going into a new role or returning to an existing role, because I suppose you have the opportunity now to reset, or set push the reset or the refresh button, and going back, you have the opportunity to kind of let your colleagues know from the outset what your working arrangements will be, and be very clear about that. Because if the I suppose sometimes what can happen is, like, the more you're in the office, the more the expectation is that you will be there. If your hours finish at 4, but you're always still there till 5, the natural expectation is that, sure, look, Karen will always be still there at 5, when actually your hours were 4 o'clock. So it's really being very clear about that, and setting very clear boundaries, and sticking to those as much yourself as others do. And be very careful to outline that to others. Make your schedule kind of predictable, and, as I said, setting those boundaries by really communicating very clearly about the boundaries and how you plan to operate and how you plan to kind of schedule your day, and to be very I suppose predictable and specific in relation to that, and try and stick to it as much as possible, particularly when you're setting that rhythm and setting those expectations. So that's really important in terms of carving out those boundaries, making sure that everybody is aware of those boundaries are, and that they know, well, look, Karen's going to be in the office Monday to Friday, 9 to 2, and they're the parameters. Now, obviously, there will be times, I'm sure, where you'll need a bit of flexibility and agility, both on both sides, in fact, but for the most part, it's being very specific in relation to those and setting those expectations. As much as, I suppose, setting the expectations in work, you also need to have very clear boundaries in terms of building in quality time for family. So what I would say here is, don't just let it happen by accident. Be really very deliberate to kind of say, right, well, this is the time that I've carved out for family. So whether that's, the mornings dropping, children to school, the evenings going to see, parents or loved ones, or, the weekends are sacrosanct, and that's it. That's my time with family. So it's being very careful to specifically set aside that time, or if you're deciding to take parental leave, that you're very specific in terms of that, and making the time a priority, as I said. So put that in and work everything else around it, as opposed to what we tend to do is to kind of say, right, well, look, I'll get the work done first, and then I'll spend time with the kids. So it's really, working out what works best for you and for the family, and for other commitments, whatever they might be, and building time around that. So it's about getting the priorities right and in the order that you feel is best, and then, working around that, and taking it step by step. The other thing to remember is that, look, you're not on your own. There is help and support out there. So the thing is not to be afraid to ask for support, because we can all find ourselves in that situation to say, look, I'm grand, look, I'll be fine, I can manage this, like I've done it before, or sure, look, this can't be that difficult, I'll be absolutely fine. But I suppose it can be a challenge. So don't be afraid to look to family and friends for support. Lots of people have been through the same situation as before, so it is important to reach out, as I said, friends, family. If you're returning to a current employer, I'm sure there will be support there through HR or an employee assistance program. Francesca now shortly will outline the supports that we have available through the institute. So it's really important to seek help and support. The other thing I would say here is kind of outsource where possible. And I suppose the reason I mentioned that is I remember a number of years ago we were running a returners workshop for members, and it was specifically for members who had been out of the workplace for a number of years. And there was a member in particular who had taken a career break out for family. I think she had maybe 3 or 4 kids, and she had worked in a very senior role with a particular multinational technology organization. She'd been very, very successful, decided to take some time out. So I think she was probably maybe 3 or 4 years out of the workplace, and then she decided to go back, and she went back into a very similar role with the same organization that she had left. But the difference now was that she had more commitments outside of the home, and I remember asking her in terms of, well, look, what was the key to making that transition back? Because her husband also had quite a senior role. She was traveling quite a lot, and the secret to her success was to outsource. So it really, what she meant by that was, to look at opportunities where you can get others to help. So whether that was, in terms of the childcare, whether it was getting somebody in to help within the home, or to share some of the other responsibilities at home. So it really is to kind of look and say, well, look, where can I get that help and that support, and how can I kind of outsource some of that. Now, that may not be for everybody, But look, it's something definitely to consider. There may be certain aspects that you don't want to outsource, but it's certainly something to consider. The other thing I would say is to let go of perfectionism. And I know this is something that, a lot of us can struggle with, because we want to do everything really, really well. And I know from speaking to quite a number of members that the challenge can be that, sometimes they feel like they're falling between two stools, that maybe they're not doing as good a job in work as they thought they did before. And then they have that, I suppose, that guilt and that feeling of, gosh, I'm not being a very good parent either. So very often that is in our own minds. So it's trying to kind of, I suppose, challenge that, to kind of say, look, am I actually right in this assumption? Am I, beating myself up unnecessarily, or is this actually the case? So it's just, I suppose, again, coming back to that phrase, cutting yourself a bit of slack, to kind of say, look, you can't have perfection all of the time. And the key phrase here is good is good enough. And it's something that resonated with me a number of years ago when I was doing a thesis for a master's in coaching. And I remember my supervisor saying to me, Karen, he said, look, you're going to have to just now go with it and realize when good is good enough. And it really stuck with me, because otherwise I would have just kept going back and back. And you know yourself, each time you go back, you will still find something, but you just have to get to a point where you say, look, good is good enough. The other thing we have a tendency to do is to compare ourselves with others, and that absolutely erodes confidence on a whole number of different levels, because you could be comparing two totally different scenarios, two totally different people. You could be comparing your own internal kind of emotions and goings on with somebody else's external situation, which you just don't know what's going on internally for anybody. So it isn't a fair comparison to make, and it can actually trip us up, and again, add extra challenges where it's not necessary, not always necessary. So it's really just about being more realistic and backing yourself, and just kind of cutting yourself, as I said, a little bit of slack, to say, look, I've got this, I can do this, I don't have to be perfect all of the time, and good is good enough. The other thing that is quite common for, parents going back into the workplace, is often that kind of sense of guilt, that, kind of, you're leaving your family, you're, as I said already, you're not doing the same job as you did before, you're not at home, and that you're not doing anything kind of well enough. So it really is just about being very aware of those emotions, challenging those, and, making sure that you're checking in with them to kind of say, is this justified? And if it's not, it's just making sure that you're changing that narrative to yourself, and making sure that you are being more positive, and that more supportive of yourself as well. So that's really, really important, because we're often our own worst critics. So as with everything, a bit of planning in advance when you're returning to the workplace is definitely very helpful. So, whether that's planning in terms of, looking for a new role, whether that's, planning in terms of CV and interview preparation, all of which we can help you with here, whether it's planning in terms of, kind of the logistical side of things, it's really just getting into that space where you're thinking it through, giving yourself time to kind of work through it kind of step by step, even so far as to kind of map out a schedule. I know one of the things I find quite useful on a Sunday afternoon, we tend to map the week out on the fridge, to kind of say, look, who is where and what days, who needs to be collected, who's going to be at home for dinner, who's not, so it's just really kind of mapping out that schedule, and kind of figuring out what is going to work. It means then that you're, I suppose, better organized. You can make any adjustments that you might need, and really just, I suppose, sharing the load, and kind of getting everybody to kind of help out at home. So it's just, I suppose, sharing that workload and balancing things. It would even include things like, doing a bit of a trial run. So, especially now at the moment, it's hard to know what way the traffic is. It's hard to kind of get used to that kind of hybrid working, like a couple of days in the office versus a couple of days at home. So it does take a bit of getting used to that new schedule, also things like, what do I wear to the office now? And that's a big question, actually, interestingly, that we're getting, because, when people were working from home, they were obviously a lot more casually dressed. What is the dress code now going back into the office? It's certainly changed in a lot of organizations. So it's things like that, just to kind of get an insight into that, do a trial run, kind of get a sense, or even check in with a number of people to get I suppose that inside information. So it's all just about planning, stepping down through the process step by step, so that when it comes to the big day or the big week, you've gone through each of those kind of steps in your own head, and it will prepare you, even just to kind of drive in one day to kind of get a sense of how it's going to be. And it's amazing, actually, once you've done that once, then you kind of get into a bit of a rhythm. And I know that even from speaking to quite a lot of people who've returned to working in the office after the lockdowns, like there was some fear and apprehension around that. Even things like getting the bus, like what's that going to be like? What's it going to be like being in the office again? So I think it is all about mapping it out, planning it out, taking it step by step, and just working through it on a step by step basis. The other thing as well is that, look, there's always going to be curveballs, there's always going to be setbacks. So it's just accepting that, particularly, for example, if you're going back to work after having a baby, inevitably there are going to be times when the baby is sick, or other children are sick, and you end up having to take time off, or you need to go for doctor's visits, or something happens at home, whatever that might be. So there will be those kind of unexpected times. So it's really just having a contingency plan in place, being prepared for it, and just acknowledging that, look, life is going to happen, and whether that's you get sick yourself or whatever it might be, it's just to be prepared for that. If it's something you're particularly anxious about, it's always a good idea to have a conversation with your line manager or boss, just to say, look, what do you think we should do if this happens? So just so you feel comfortable that you're not worried about it. Because I remember when I went back to work after my first baby, and I remember thinking, God, what am I going to do now? Like if the baby gets sick, and like I was really worried about that. And then lo and behold, it happened. And I remember having to draft my mum in at last minute. Whereas if I'd actually had those conversations in advance, there would have been a whole lot less worry, because I could have just at the time, taken some time out, and not feel that pressure. So it's about being upfront and acknowledging, look, life happens, and have that those conversations, and a plan in place, a contingency plan. So another thing to consider is reconnecting with your professional self. And that's an important part of the process, whether you're going back after maternity leave, a long period, short period, whether it's been for a career break. So it is really just about, reconnecting with yourself. If it's been for a shorter period, then obviously, and you're going back, say, after maternity leave, it can be a good idea to kind of stay in contact with people, whether that's, a coffee or a casual Zoom call, just to kind of check in and see what's going on, catch up on the gossip, find out what's happening, just know what projects are ongoing, and just kind of stay engaged. For some people that works and they want to know what's going on. Others prefer to disengage altogether and just reconnect just before they go back to work. So it's really all about whatever works for you. But I would suggest that you don't go in back cold, that either you stay in touch all the way through, or when it's coming to the time where you're going back into the workplace, that you start to reconnect, because I think that will make that transition an awful lot easier. So it is about, just reconnecting and making sure that, I suppose, what you're walking back into. You have the lay of the land, as it were, and that can certainly help and make it a lot easier. So there's a couple of steps here that, like, we'll send on these slides to you afterwards, but just in terms of reconnecting with your professional self, and particularly if you've been out of the workplace for quite some time, you will need to just kind of spend a bit of time reflecting on, reminding yourself of your past achievements, because they can seem like, I suppose, quite some time ago. So you will just need to spend a bit of time reconnecting in with that, and I suppose, thinking about, well, look, what were the things I was proudest of? What were my core achievements? When I was in the workplace, you can go back and look at old CVs or old appraisal forms, or reconnecting with old colleagues and have a cup of coffee and chat through that. A great way to reconnect can be attending either virtual events, or now that we're going back to face-to-face social events again, can be a really great way to connect and meet with people. Again, our focus at the moment within the institute is on smaller kind of social gatherings, just in the current climate, and they in particular can be a great way just to meet people again in a more of a kind of a safe place, and start to kind of build up your connections again. Like attending the various different courses and events, again, good way to kind of check in with what's going on in the profession in general, as is like I suppose taking a read of Accountancy Ireland, just again to keep yourself updated and kind of reconnecting. And look, it's all about that confidence piece that we've touched on before, and just kind of backing yourself, supporting yourself, just reaffirming, look, I am a qualified chartered accountant. I have, had a really good career of excellent experience, and it's just about reconnecting with that again now, and moving to your career forward in whatever way it is that works for you. Obviously, one of the big changes that has come out of the pandemic, and to my mind, a very positive one, is obviously the whole hybrid working piece that, for the most part is being adopted by employers. And we see that right across the different industry sectors. What we're seeing is most organizations are working on the basis of 2 to 3 days in the office, and the balance from home. So this is the ideal opportunity for you now, if you're re-entering the workplace, to think about, well, how is this going to work for me? What way would work for me, whether it's 1 day at home, 2 days, whatever that might be, just to think about this. So it's a unique opportunity to kind of look at this, that this may not have been, I suppose an opportunity previously. So it's thinking about, kind of your work schedule, your personal schedule, and, I suppose, where do you prefer to work as well? Like for some people, they prefer to work in the office. For others, they prefer to work at home. So it's really thinking about that too. It can also depend on the nature of the type of work that you do. So, for example, if your work requires quite a lot of concentration, and it's that deep kind of thought, I suppose thought focused work, working from home may be better. Whereas if it's a role, say maybe in projects, or that requires a lot more collaboration, working in the office at least some of the time may suit you better. And some people like being back in the office and enjoy that energy that they get from colleagues. So it's really thinking about and piloting and trialing what will work for you, and take advantage now of the flexibility that is being offered, because it is for some organizations, it's certainly a new departure. The other benefit that we're seeing from, I suppose, the world of recruitment is, an increasing number of part-time roles. So organizations are acknowledging that there is benefit in recruiting part-time professionals, that they see the benefit of getting, more experienced person on board, and they have an appreciation of the skills and the competencies that a chartered accountant can bring to the table. There is less of a focus on any gap that you might have in your CV. Whereas like years ago, there would have been that focus to kind of go, oh, look, they've been out of the workplace too long, it's going to take them too long to transition. That really, for the most part, is not an issue now anymore. Employers are more inclined to see the kind of the value that you're bringing in terms of, the skill set and the experience outside of the workplace, the value of the qualification and the maturity. And as I said already, employers are much more open to, having putting those flexible working arrangements in place. So there's never been a better time, if you're looking for that kind of work-life balance, part-time arrangements, there's never been a better time to have those conversations now. So moving on then, I mentioned earlier that we have supports in place from the Institute. So the first of those is our career support and recruitment service. So for members, we have free coaching and careers advice that is available. So we have a team of consultants who are available to provide you with that impartial, confidential advice. And that also includes CV and interview preparation support. So if you have a CV that you've drafted and you're not sure if it's fit for purpose, send it through to us. If you don't know where to start, give us a call. We'll help you with that. If you're not sure, how to approach the interview preparation, we can help you with that, because there has been a shift now towards competency-based interviews, and also now obviously we're in the virtual world for interviews for the most part, and have been for the last 2 years. And I suspect for first round interviews, that's where we'll stay, with second round interviews probably face to face. So if you're a little bit worried about that, let us know. We can help you there. We also have a mentor program, so we can connect you with another chartered accountant who will provide you with advice and support alongside the career coaching. We also have a career pathway, which is a competency map. Essentially, it's on our website. So if you want to just have a bit of a refresher or check to see, look, what skills do I need for the level that I'm operating at, that's a good place to start, and we can talk through that with you. We also have a recruitment service as well. So if you're interested in looking for a role, part-time or full-time, let us know. And then we also have a returners workshop, which is a full 1 day workshop that we run periodically throughout the year. So if that's it, if you're interested in that and you're looking for more in-depth advice and support than what we've provided here today, just let us know. And you can access all of those supports through emailing careers@charteredaccountants.ie. So that's it from me. So what I would say is, if you could pop any questions that you have into the questions and answer section there on the screen, that'll be really helpful, and I can deal with those afterwards. I'm going to now just stop sharing my slides, and I'm going to hand you over to my colleague Francesca from CA Support. Thank you.
No, thanks so much. Thanks so much, Karen, for having us here. My name is Francesca, and I work in the Thrive Wellbeing Hub. And I suppose this is a really great opportunity, and thank you to Karen for having us along, because obviously we want to make all of you on the call aware of the supports and services that are available to you from the Wellbeing Hub. So I'm going to hopefully take you through some of that and a few tips and tricks as well. Although I have to say, I listened in on the presentation there, and as a working parent myself, I think I would have loved such a brilliant webinar before my return back in the day. So thank you so much for having us here. So to give you a sense of Thrive for anybody who maybe doesn't know of us or have heard of us from before, we are now Thrive Wellbeing Hub, and I suppose we previously would have been known as CA Support, and I'll go on to explain a little bit further how CA Support is still very much a part of Thrive and what we do, but it is more focused on the financial, whereas Thrive is very much looking at your wellbeing kind of needs throughout your life cycle. So that's for everything from our students right the way up to into your retirement. And obviously, as you can see in our pathway that we use in this model, returners are very much a part of that, and are people that we do see on regular occasion coming to us for a bit of additional support. So we name some things there like confidence, upskilling, or the childcare issues as things that kind of come up for people, but really it's anything that might be affecting you in this kind of period of change that we're actually here to help and support with that. And I'll go into a little bit more detail as to how we do that as well. We have got a dedicated website, and I'll provide all the details at the end as to how to contact us and our contact details. But we're really proud of the website in the sense that we have got some really, really good content up on there that's worth kind of checking out. And obviously, it's article form, so you can do it in your own time as and when needed. But there's some great content on there. We also put quite a bit of content out over social media. We tend to be in the e-news every week with a wellbeing kind of article or a wellbeing related link in there. And you'll also find, as I know Karen mentioned about kind of keep it up to date with Accountancy Ireland and that type of literature during this time. And you will also find us kind of feature there around kind of wellbeing topics related to the area. And all of our content is very much informed by kind of specialist content from experts as well. So we're really, really proud of that. And I'll share the details as we go on. So what exactly do we do in Thrive, and what exactly is available to you? So there's lots of things, and I suppose this is the list, but it's not limited to what you see in front of you on the screen. First and foremost, we have a confidential one-to-one listening service. So effectively, we call it the listening service, but ultimately what that is you being able to lift the phone and connect in with one of us here on the Thrive team. We're not a big, huge team, so it's not a case of coming through and, you know, not knowing who you'll get each time you ring in. It's usually kind of one of either myself or my manager Dee that's on the end of the call. And we're very much there and available to you during this time and beyond. We are always happy to take a call. We're always happy to listen, even if it's just a bit of a drain off of emotions or a particularly difficult day, or even if it's just a check-in to talk about what supports are available. We're always happy to take those kind of calls. We also have our access to completely free professional counselling service as well. So what that is we actually partner with the Leia Wellness Services, and we have up to 8 sessions completely free of charge available to our members. So that can be for anything that you might be experiencing. Sometimes people will use it in terms of maybe anxieties that are coming up. We've seen a particular increase over obviously the last 2 years of people using it for really dealing with those kind of emotions and difficulties that are coming up related to COVID and lockdowns and changes in routine and all of that. So again, that is there and available, and you just link through ourselves in Thrive for that. We also are very proud that myself and my manager Dee are both trained wellness coaches ourselves. So we offer in-house the wellness coaching, up to 3 sessions free of charge, again with ourselves. And wellness coaching is probably a bit more of a holistic kind of look at kind of your overall goals and what breaking it down into kind of into actionable steps to sort of help you reach those goals. And again, we're both really passionate about offering that out to members, and we see a lot of people again engage with that and really get a lot out of it in terms of you know, mapping out a kind of well life plan for themselves as well. Our mental health and wellbeing webinars are obviously very popular at the moment in the kind of the time of webinars and people accessing information that way. We are very proud that we are offering at least kind of once a month a wellbeing webinar at the moment, and I'll give you a little bit of more detail on them, but at any point, if you want to, you know, be registered for those webinars, let us know. But also, we have now got like a live event stream on, or not a stream, we got an event section on our website, so you can check in there at any time and you can see the kind of upcoming webinars. And they also feature on the CPD calendar, where presumably you would have found out about today's session. So you'll kind of see our wellbeing webinars in there as well. The next one is not up on the calendar yet, but will be in the next few days, and is actually on the 17th of May. And I'll give you a little bit more detail on that at the end as well. And ultimately, I suppose Thrive is a dedicated team to support you. We are very much here. We are always happy to take a call, even if it's something that you don't feel is necessarily well-being related, but you just need to check in around something. We're always happy to take the call. And even if it's an onward referral to somewhere else in the institute, we're happy to do that. We do particularly link with Karen and her team in careers. And I have to say, particularly for returners, it's really great, the services that are there and available. And we would see an overlap a lot of the time of people who would access the career supports, but also might be accessing with ourselves in Thrive for some of the more emotional supports as well. So it's really complementary in that sense. So the tailored webinars, I touched on them a little bit, and you'll see, hopefully see some familiar faces there. Maybe Dr. Eddie Murphy of Operation Transformation, or Pat Divley, to name just a few. And the good news is that these are obviously some of the faces from our previous webinars that we've ran, but also we have recordings for most of these, and we're always happy if you get in touch. And I think, gosh, you know what, that would really resonate with some of the details from a previous webinar. I can share those links and kind of send them on. And those recorded webinars are quite nice. You can listen to them in your own time, use them as almost like a podcast or whatever way you want to do it. So to give a sense of who we help, you'll see on screen, obviously it's just an example of somebody who gave their permission to share their details, for us to share their details as an example. So this was somebody that was a self-referral. There was a member in their mid-30s. They were a finance manager in a large multinational. And it was really the work-life balance which was impacting on their marriage and also on their stress levels. And the sleep was a big piece for this person as well. So to give an example of the help they received, it was the one-to-one listening service, obviously initially to really engage them at first, but also for ongoing check-in support, which they received through that one-to-one listening service. But they also were able to access the 8 professional counselling sessions. They went through that process, got a lot out of it, and found that it was actually really helpful then to come back in and link back in for the wellness coaching sessions and really kind of refocusing them forward on their wellness goals. And again, the regular check-ins can continue from the team, and we're always happy to do that as well. I referenced earlier CA support and how previously that would have been what we were known as, and how we've moved Thrive over to the wellbeing side of things. But the CA support financial assistance still exists, and I like to mention it because obviously there could be people on the call who this might be particularly helpful to. So it was founded in 1928, and I said effectively it's the benevolent fund. We are a registered charity. We rely very much on the donations of other chartered accountants to it. We have our own board of directors. It's separate to the institute. It's very confidential in that sense. And effectively, it's an emergency financial assistance for anyone who finds themselves in difficulty that needs to reach out. And it really, really is the community, the chartered accountants community, looking after one another. So if you need to find out more information on that or want to connect in on that, you can come into the CA support information through Thrive as well. So it's no problem at all. We're all the one team in that sense. So again, just it's kind of definitely complementary of what Karen has taken you through already, but we just like to give a few kind of tips and tricks, particularly to a group like yourselves coming back to work after a break or a period of being off. So I'll take you through that very quickly, and hopefully it'll kind of wrap up some of what Karen took you through as well. So first and foremost, putting the basics in place. I know Karen spoke a lot about getting the right supports and using your network, and even linking in with family and friends and whatever you can do, and to give yourself the kind of best opportunity in that return. And we definitely would support that as well. Being kind to yourself, giving yourself a break, giving yourself permission to be kind to yourself and to realize that this is a temporary phase and that you will get through it. I think that's a big one for everyone within any period of change. And it is absolutely one day at a time. Everything is different, and this is really around the mindset. And we talk sometimes about the acceptance mindset or the growth mindset. And again, we have lots more links and information around this. If you do want to check in with us on it. It's really about focusing on what you can control. The idea that our brains and our thoughts are not fixed, and that we can really grow from them, and we can tackle those self-limiting beliefs that we might be experiencing at the time. And it does give us an opportunity to establish new boundaries. And there is a lot to be said for a time like this, where there's a particular amount of change and new things coming, where there is an opportunity to really establish new boundaries and make new routines for yourself as well. Self-care. Self-care, I suppose that word is kind of thrown around quite a lot, but it really is so important. And particularly at a time when things are changing and maybe things are going at a quicker pace than previously, or whatever it might be. The self-care piece is so important. I know I spoke a little bit there around kind of that change in routines. And I often say to people, and I have often had people in a returning to work situation where I've said to them from the beginning, you have the opportunity to really establish in that new routine some time for yourself in self-care. Now look, being a parent myself, I know that that's not going to necessarily be an hour a day of self-care time, but even if it's like a 5-minute or a 10-minute kind of check-in time that you have during the day, or that's on your calendar, to kind of give yourself that self-care space, it can just make such a difference, even in terms of energy levels and overall well-being. And we talk a little bit about tracking your stressors. The idea of that is just becoming a little bit more aware of where those stress points are in the week for you, or in the day, and how you're responding to them. And really having that information, again, can really help inform those new routines. The me time every day, I kind of touched on that already. And just again, the importance of, like, if you can try and forge out that little bit of time for yourself, however small, it can just really make a big difference. Getting out in nature is so important, and not necessarily, the getting out in nature where we rush to take the kids to the playground or whatever it might be after work, but even just that space to breathe for yourself and just get some of those good feelings from nature. The nurturing personal relationships, I think Karen spoke a little bit about that as well, but it really is as well about it very much, it's a time when you might be focusing on work and looking forward and focusing on that professional side, but certainly the personal relationships are just as important and deserve that little bit of kind of time and attention as well. And optimizing sleep, gut, and energy. I mean, I think we sometimes do underestimate the importance of that, and it's particularly with the change in routines. It's a real time when you need to be aware of those changes and anything that you might need to address. But again, all of what I speak about, we are happy to help with all of this. And if any of that has resonated with you, or you think, do you know what, I'd like to find a bit more information out about that, then please do feel free to reach out to us at the details I have on screen now. So that's obviously the website, and then you'll also reach us by email at thrive@charteredaccountants.ie or by mobile as well. And just to say, that event on the 17th of May, it will be up in the next few days. It's a wellbeing webinar. It's actually with a chartered accountant who has turned therapist himself, and it'll be all around, the title of it is around work and worth, and it's all around our relationships in and out of work and our identity with self and work. So it might be really interesting for some of you on the call as well. I'll hand back to Karen, and thank you. And if there's any questions, feel free to let me know.
Thanks so much for that, Francesca. That's definitely one I'll be tuning in for. It sounds interesting in terms of that connection between like our self-worth and work. And that's where some of those kind of mixed emotions around guilt and those kind of feelings can come from as well. So I think it's definitely worth checking in on. So Francesca has provided the email address for Thrive. Then in terms of careers, you can simply email careers@charteredaccountants.ie and we'll get back to you. And just so you know, both in terms of Thrive and the career service, that everything is 100% confidential. So you need to have no concerns there. So any of those interactions with myself or indeed with Francesca and her colleagues will be 100% confidential. So you can be assured about that. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. It was a pleasure having you join us, and thank you so much for your time. Take care. Bye-bye.